So now it's finally time to get started with the actual diet principles, and we're gonna start with the top 5 diet principles that you need to succeed in dieting and reach your goals, regardless of what they are. So this is basically a system to manage your weight and to control your body weight. And actually I have 17 diet principles that I use, but I'm gonna start with the top 5 just to keep it a bit simple, and then we're gonna jump straight into the next 12 diet principles after that. Okay, and then make sure that you take notes and write down the principles that you maybe didn't know of before. So anything that's gonna be new to you, that you think will help you, make sure you write it down and make use of it. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with diet principle number 1. And that is to measure your body weight every morning after you've gone to the toilet, because that is the most precise measurement you can get, because there are always quite significant weight fluctuations of your body weight during the day. My body weight fluctuates or ends up being usually 2 kilos higher or 3 to 4 pounds higher in the evening than in the morning after toilet, okay? And the reason for that is mainly all the hydration and food that you take in during the day, and then basically throughout the night you are sweating and you're dehydrating basically. And of course you also lose weight when you go to toilet next day. Surprise, surprise. So that is the foundation of a successful diet, is that you have a tracking system that is accurate for how to track your body weight, because that's going to be your guideline for all the other principles. And by tracking the guideline and writing it down on paper every day, you're sure that you can do adjustments along the way, and you can see what your body weight is doing in terms of trends or fluctuations, because your body weight will also fluctuate a little bit up and down, depending on many small factors like hydration, of course, electrolytes in the body, carbohydrates stored in the body, what kinds of food you eat. Also, like if you had a really hard training session on a really hot day, then you're gonna be dehydrated for the next day, and then it doesn't mean that you lost a lot of fat. I mean, you may have lost some fat, but it could also be mainly water. So don't freak out when you have these fluctuations, because mostly they are related to your hydration level and your sodium balance or electrolytes, also glycogen stores. So with all these factors, you just cannot have a completely stable body weight. So it's good to know these biological reasons for fluctuations, so you don't misinterpret the data that you see and collect when you're weighing yourself and tracking it all the time. And you will also get more familiar with it as you go along the way. Now let's jump straight to diet principle number 2. And that is to eat regularly enough to avoid hunger spikes. So that is usually between every 3 to 5 hours you should have a meal to avoid hunger spikes. And when the first meal is going to start in the day is individual. It depends on how your body feels. You can also train your body to get used to eating within a certain time window, as you maybe know already from intermittent fasting. I also do a slight variation of intermittent fasting because I'm eating within an 11-hour window. Some people eat within an 8-hour window, which is proper intermittent fasting, which is just a fancy way of saying skip breakfast, because that's what most people do in intermittent fasting. They skip breakfast and then they just have lunch, or maybe a bigger lunch and a snack and then a big dinner. But the point of principle number 2 is that you want to eat regularly enough so you avoid hunger spikes. So you have to practice to have your meal timing on point, pretty much. So you just get a little bit hungry, so you have a good healthy appetite, and then you eat your food. So by avoiding these hunger spikes, you drastically increase your chances of success, because one of the main risks of failure when dieting is when you get really hungry and things get out of control and you just end up eating 3 times as much as you're supposed to, because that's what your body feels like doing or tells you to do, because it's a survival machine, right? So don't end up in survival mode by using principle number 2 of meal timing. Now, diet principle number 3 is a little bit related to number 2, but it's really important. And that is that you have to remind yourself to remember that it takes about 10 to 15 minutes from after you're done eating your meal until you actually start to feel full. So that means, let me repeat that so make sure you understand it. After you've finished eating, you're actually still going to be feeling hungry and you feel like you want to continue eating and you feel like your body needs to continue eating. But that feeling is actually going to completely disappear even if you stop eating and just wait for 10 to 15 minutes, because there's a delay in the feeling of feeling full. It's like a biological delay there is. Okay, so you have to be aware of this and trust the process. And this is especially important when you get further into your dieting. It's going to be pretty easy in the first maybe couple of months, but if you have like a longer diet journey, if you need to lose a significant amount of weight, it's going to be important to keep this in mind as you go along. So you can maybe return to this video or write it down in your notes, these principles, and read the principles again and again, because you have to remember them to make it easy to be successful in dieting. You have to know all the principles. Okay, now it's time for diet principle number 4. So we are almost done with the first top 5 principles. So number 4 is also extremely important, and that is to have a fixed cheat day of the week. And that means to have one day or maybe even 2 days where you are allowed to eat something unhealthy that is outside of your normal weight loss diet principles. So for example, if you really like pizza or really like burger, then you can eat this, for example, every Sunday. I recommend having 2 meals per week. So this could be 2 meals on a Sunday where you eat almost as much as you want and almost whatever you want. Okay, so you can choose to put both of these cheat meals on a Sunday, for example, or you can have one cheat meal on Saturday and one cheat meal on Sunday. Whatever you think works best for you. So the reason it's really important to have these cheat meals scheduled every week is because it serves as an important finish line. It's like a psychological finish line you can aim for every week, because that's how the mind builds motivation and also dopamine actually. There's both a psychological benefit to this, but also a very neurobiological benefit to having this finish line every week, because it helps you stay motivated when you see this finish line, because that's how actually dopamine build-up works. So it creates motivation, builds up dopamine during the week, that you're getting closer and closer to your Sunday. That is going to be really delicious, you look forward to it, and that gives you the motivation to carry on and follow the disciplined diet throughout the week, and then reward yourself at the end of the week. And this doesn't mess up your progress. You could argue that having those extra calories every week at the end actually just assists your recovery a little bit. But most importantly, it's a psychological benefit, because it helps you build your motivation to keep going when you can always see a finish line and then see the next week's finish line and so on. Okay, so now it's time to principle number 5. And that is the core part of this diet course. And that is to practice eye measurement, because that's what we do in this diet principle course. Is we, instead of counting calories, we learn to use eye measurement of the food that we put on the plate. Because what you're actually doing when you get good at doing eye measurements of how much food you put on your plate or how much you eat, is that you practice basically just to eat exactly the right amounts of food that you would actually eat if you were counting the calories. So you're gonna end up with exactly the same results. We're just being a little bit smart here. So instead of counting the calories all the time, we carefully estimate the amounts of food that creates a total amount of calorie for every meal that we don't have to calculate, because we're just practicing how to measure the amounts by eye measurement, and then we get the same results. Okay? The only thing it really requires is, number 1, practice. Number 2, you need a certain background knowledge of what each food source contains of calories. Okay, so the end goal is to be able to put the correct amount of food on your plate and then say, oh, this is how much I'm gonna eat. Or if you're in a restaurant, you're going to separate some of the food that you decide not to eat. Usually it's gonna be some carbs and some fat, because usually they give you way too many carbs in a restaurant, and also often too much fat. So you're going to practice to pick out the right amount of food you're going to eat and then say, okay, this is what I'm going to eat because this is what I normally eat. And then you're going to eat it, finish, and then you're going to leave the rest alone. If you're in a restaurant or if you're at home, you're just going to simply do your meal prep and only eat the right amounts or only have the correct amount of food on your plate. And then, what you're going to do is you're going to weigh yourself every day, and then you're going to slightly adjust these amounts that you put on your plate every day to either be a little bit more or a little bit less. Based on what's happening with your body weight from day to day, you can adjust up and down with these amounts that you put on the plate. So now I'm going to tell you some tips that can help you understand how many calories there are in different food sources, okay? And I'm going to give you 4 different kinds of food sources that I use to divide all kinds of food into one of these 4 categories, okay? First one is protein sources, so that's all meats, egg, and then you have all kinds of carbs, okay? That's an energy source. That's gonna be your main energy source, and that is things such as rice, pasta, bread, grain, and sugar. And then you have your fats. Also, it's important to have fats in there, but you have to be a bit careful with them. We'll get to that in a second. Why? As you probably already know, they are pretty high in calories. But fat sources, okay, so that's usually plant oils or animal fats and nuts. And then lastly, and this is your best friend, that is vegetables. Vegetables I also count as a food source because all the vegetables, they are very low on calories, or you could say they have a low calorie density, which means they have a high volume, they make you full, but they have a low calorie density per volume, which makes it perfect for weight loss dieting because you can use vegetables to make you feel full in the stomach by volume, and then you have to use protein to make sure you have enough building blocks to rebuild, to recover your muscles from training, and have enough carbs so that you're sure that you have enough energy to function because it's an energy source, unless you're on keto or carnivore, but that's another story. And then you also have to have your fats because actually fats are building blocks. Actually fats, in case you don't know, and many people don't know this, but fats are important building blocks for all cell membranes in your whole body. They are also crucial for some vitamins to be absorbed in the body. So for vitamin absorption, okay, and they're also the building blocks of hormones, which are extremely important for your recovery and functioning. Okay, so now I'll give you some guidelines for how many calories each of these 4 different food sources have, okay? So first of all, we're gonna say that vegetables, they are 1x of calories per amount. To give you some numbers, most vegetables, they have around 40 calories per 100 gram. Okay, we're gonna call that 1x just to keep it super simple. And then the next food source is gonna be carbs. And there we have rice and potatoes, which should be your go-to carbohydrate source. They have 3x calories. Okay, so they have 3 times more per 100 gram than vegetables. Okay, and then bread actually have 6x calories, 5 or 6x. So they have almost double the calories as rice and potatoes per 100 gram. So you want to be a little bit careful with bread in the carbohydrate category. Also pasta is 4x, so pasta is right in between bread and rice and potatoes, okay? So pasta can be okay sometimes, but ideally you want to use rice and potatoes because they make you feel more full because you get more volume of carbohydrates in your stomach compared to the other sources, okay? Let's talk about your protein source. So protein is about 4x. So protein has around 4 times the calories of vegetables. Okay, so 4x. So it's also in the same ballpark as carbohydrate sources, okay? But the big difference about protein is you shouldn't adjust protein too far down. You actually have to eat a certain amount of protein in order to maintain your muscle mass. Otherwise, you're gonna lose your muscle mass, and that means you're gonna burn less calories throughout the day. So you could almost say that protein is a non-negotiable. Recommended protein per body weight is 2 grams of protein per 1 kilo of body weight, or 1 gram of protein per 1 pound of body weight. And that is lean body mass, okay? You can calculate that on, you can search for US Navy body fat calculator. There's a system you calculate your lean body mass and body fat percentage, by the way. So now we're gonna talk about the calorie content of fats. And the amount of calories in fat is really high compared to all the other food sources. And that is 20x of vegetables. Okay, so if you have 100 grams of vegetables and 100 grams of oil, for example, of fat, usually, you know, by the way, plant oils or oils are 100% fat, by the way. Then there's 20 times more calories in the fat than the vegetables. Okay, so you have to be careful how much fat you eat. And usually, to be specific, when I'm dieting for weight loss, I use a teaspoon of cooking oil for every meal I cook, or for a salad, for example, if I'm having a salad. So I use a teaspoon to measure out the oil that I use, or the fats. It could also be pesto, for example, if I'm having a pasta. So that I know that I make sure that I get the fats, because fats are essential nutrients for the body to function. So you want to make sure that you get fats, but in the right amount. If you're trying to lose weight, it's really important that this amount is kept small. And if you're maintaining your weight, or even gaining weight, or main gaining as I call it, I'll explain you more about that later. In that case, then you can be more loose with your fat intake and more relaxed and less precise, okay? So these were the top 5 principles that I use in diet, and I'm already excited to get into the next 12 diet principles. So make sure you take some notes and let's continue.